Hey, gang.
Hi.
I'm
Hello.
so glad that you're taking this time. Thank you so much for sharing an hour with me. I wanted to have this conversation. First of all, my name is David. You all know this, but those watching, my name is David Sisco. I am a voice teacher and a composer, and I run contemporarymusicaltheater.com. And I've been thinking a lot about, as a teacher, the importance of creating safe space for students, and a lot of that has come out of my own personal experience. I during grad school had a very negative experience singing, and so much so that I would, for years, get myself sick right before I had to sing publicly. And this is actually, I sang a concert last Friday for some high school students. It was literally the first time that I did not sinus infection before having to sing, which is kind of, it was great, but also like, I'm 44 years old. Oh my God, that took a long time to kind of unpack and figure out. And so I think that when we're singing, there's a lot of, we deal with our own fear and insecurity and vulnerability. And I think it's incumbent upon us as voice teachers to kind of speak to those things as well as the technical things that we have to talk about. So I just wanted to get us all together to have some of those conversations, because I know I have thoughts, but I know each of you as really thoughtful, brilliant individuals that are going to bring to this conversation something that I never, ever would have thought of. So thank you. And why don't we go ahead and kind of start introducing ourselves? Why don't we start with Alexa? Will you tell us who you are and a little bit about you?
Sure. My name is Alexa Cepeda. I moved to New York about a year ago. I went to Ithaca College and studied musical theater there, and have been working professionally in Philly and New York since then. And I feel very closely with my good pal Fear. He's a man for me, but she can also be a she. But I mean, should I go in about like how I relate to it, or what more introduction are you looking for?
No, that's good, and then we're gonna totally dig into that level.
Okay.
That's perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Anthony, tell us a little bit about you.
All right. It's good to be with you, first of all. My name's Anthony Turner. I teach at Wagner College voice, and I was also formerly at New York University at Tisch School of the Arts. And I have been singing professionally for a little over 40 years at this point. Both of my degrees are in performance and classical base, but we also looked into music theater. So it's been a very varied career as far as genres.
Awesome. Miss Heather.
Hi, my name is Heather Statham. I'm a performer and vocal coach in Atlanta. David, we have talked in Sherry's class about coming at things sideways. I've come at this like upward, sideways, and downways, because my initial desire was to be a dancer. And so that's how I spent most of my years in training as a dancer. I could sing, but I didn't think about singing as an outlet or a specific course of study. So fear prevented me from doing a lot of things for a lot of time. And it wasn't until later in life that I reconnected with singing and sing more with band and do that more, and am ready to dip my toe back into musical theater and later in life. So.
I love that, because I can tell you personally that she doesn't just sing, she sings.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right.
Oh, it is church. It is really a beautiful thing. Thank you, Heather.
Well, thank you, David.
And Gabriel.
Hi, I'm Gabriel Trimbur. I am a recent graduate of Wagner College, and I had the luxury of studying with Anthony for 3 years, and I've also worked with David I've known you for about 5 years,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, so we've worked in a couple shows together, and then in class work as well. I studied theater performance at Wagner, and I'm currently located in Florida working a contract. So I'm just really excited to be here and to be thought of to, bring some input to this. So that's a little about me.
Absolutely. So I want to start by asking, you've both graduated, so it's to call you students. We're all students because we're all students.
Yes.
But I have you neatly in this, as I said earlier, the Brady Bunch pattern of all is beautiful. That I have teachers on my right, and I have students that I know as students or clients on the left. So I want to start with the students. Can you talk about a time when you felt like fear held you back from singing more freely, and what triggered that event, and how did that manifest itself in your body and in your voice? Alexa, would you want to start with that?
Sure. I have so perfect coming out of a contract, because I have so many specific moments in the show that night after night after night presented the same sort of thought pattern and behavior. So there's a moment specifically in Thank You for the Music where I have a soaring moment, and every night before that moment happened, I had a thought, and the thought was, what if I crack? And that triggered the event, one little thought. And I mean, I don't think I was necessarily attached to my body. I really felt like I was a neck and a head, and everything existed right here. So I can't actually speak to how my body felt, because I was so unattached to my body. But I would say it was tense. If I were to guess, I would say it was not grounded. I couldn't feel the stage underneath my feet. And I did develop some, I don't know what I would call them, sort of dependent movements, in that if I sang it this way, or if I closed my eyes during this note, or if I looked in this corner, almost a little OCD, but I had this thought of, if I sing it this way in rehearsal, and I over and over and over again, and I repeat it exactly on stage, then I won't crack. So it was a very, how can I control this moment with my brain?
Yeah, thank you.
For sure.
Gabriel, how about you?
So coming out of college, there are so many moments. I think most recently for me was callbacks for the Pirates of Penzance, which was the last show that I got to work on. I was backstage, but I remember walking into the audition. Anthony and I had prepared for this for a couple weeks prior, and the audition was seemingly easy. And I got the call back for Frederick, and looking at the music, there is I believe a high B flat that you have to hit. And I had the music for about 12 hours before the callback, and Anthony and I talked through, well, how do I need to prepare to hit this note at 9 o'clock in the morning and present it in a professional manner that also, renders, you possible to be considered for the role. So we had this whole game plan walking in, and I even was up at, I think, 7:30 to meet with Anthony to warm up both the body, the mind, and then the voice. And then when we got into the room, I've worked with the director before, and I know he's based a lot in movement. And and I don't know why I forgot that, but the expectation was, okay, we want you to sing this music, but we also want you to make very bold choices with your body. And something I've struggled with throughout my whole 4 years was I'm not very connected with my body when I first get a new piece. So I think all of the training and all the planning went right out the window for this callback, because now I'm focused on, I have to hit this high B flat and make it sound good, while also connecting to a scene partner that I wasn't expecting to work with, and also move in a specific way. And I started creating all these scenarios of expectations, and watching my colleagues who are also in the callback perform the same piece and the choices they were making. You start kind of creating these ideas of, oh, I don't want to copy them and I want to make my own decisions. So when I finally did get up to sing the piece, it's the same feeling of you're just existing right here, because everything else is so tight. And I remember, I think my hands might have moved a little bit, but my hands were shaking because I'm also holding the music, because I'm not off book in the 12 hours that I had, which then it becomes, does this look like I'm unprepared? And you freeze. You freeze in the room, and when it's all said and done, you come back to earth and you think, wow, I had this whole game plan that went out the window because I didn't trust the game plan. And I think a lot of movement stems from how you sing and understand the text and the notes and the patterns within the music. And I didn't trust that in the moment, because I wasn't blindsided, because I should have known, you need to make bold choices, but at the same time, I didn't relax enough to let that naturally happen. So that was a big learning moment for me. And I remember going back to Anthony, and we discussed that a lot post callback, and what could have gone better and what to learn from it.
Thank you for sharing that. Teachers, I want to talk to you for a second. Has there been a moment in your teaching that you can talk about where you felt like you were judging yourself during the lesson, and what triggered that judgment, and how did you overcome it? I'll give you, just by way of an example, every month I do a free masterclass for my studio, just as a way of kind of getting everyone together, and because they see each other all the time out in the world, and I think it's just connects them better. And also because I find that a lot of young professionals after college, classes cost something, and it's very expensive, and I think oftentimes young professionals forget that they did not create fear, or they did not create failure. So it's really helpful to see, somebody else work and be like, oh, I get it, I do that too, right? So I was working with a younger student, and I wanted her to sing with a more legit sound. It was a more contemporary sound on this Gershwin song. And so I had this thought that came to my head, and it was that I wanted her to hold essentially the sphere in front of her, and sing the sphere, sing the roundness of the sphere. And then I said to myself, so I had that idea, and then 2 seconds later, I was like, that is the most ridiculous thing. You're not going to have her do that. It's not going to work, and people are going to think you're an idiot. So why would you ever do that? You're in a master class. There are students that don't know you, that they're going to come in and be like, oh my gosh, why would you work with him? Of course, all of this happens that fast. Right? Mm-hmm. So I suppressed that moment and asked the student to do it. I was like, I know this sounds weird. It may not work, but we're just going to improv and just see what happens. It worked so well. Mm-hmm. It was crazy successful. And so I'm glad I was able to kind of overcome that. And I'm glad that she was open to trying that in a public forum. But it's those types of moments. I think it's important for for our younger artists to realize that we have those moments too.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if anything came to mind. Heather, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes. Like I said, I struggle, I guess the term now would be imposter syndrome, a lot, in that I wasn't trained in a, my education was not formalized in singing, and my college experience was more in dance and overview of the arts as a whole, as opposed to focused study in that. So, and I have to figure out how to capitalize on this a little bit, because I have the ability at times to equate singing a lot to dance, and it as a visual representation. And so I have found some success with dancers who are fearful of singing to use dance terminology and to use things that they have to think of in dance and the way you have to hold yourself and such and so on. And I have the ability to connect with them on that, which is pretty cool. And that would be where those moments, like you're saying, David, to go, and I found myself putting that preface in there. I have no idea if this is going to work at all. And please forgive me if I sound absolutely crazy. I am a learned, smart, intellectual person. I do know what I'm talking about. I don't know how to specifically explain it to you the way that you will understand it. So I'm going to try a whole different barrage of things to see what works and what sticks for you. And please just go with me. Until I've gotten to that point to be able to have that type of introduction. Prior to that, I was having those split-second moments of like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever asked anybody to do. I don't even know if it works myself. I don't even, I can't hit that note myself. I struggle with this placement. I struggle with these characteristics of my voice. How in the world can I teach this? And it has stopped me. And there are times when I'm not listening I haven't listened to the student truthfully, because I am playing and overplaying and backplaying and rewinding all the things that I should have said, could have said, maybe next time we'll say. And I feel sometimes that I haven't been effective in my time together in a lesson, be it 30 minutes or half or a full hour. And so that has been, that stopped me early on. It was, like I said, in this later several years when I've found my voice enough to explain to them. And that's because I think what I'm hearing, unlike a little bit of you guys, I have a wide berth of students because I have worked from small to adults, and they're not all musical theater based, and they're not all classical based, and they're wanting to sing pop, and they're wanting to just sing in their church choir. And so I'm having to really curtail every approach individually to each student. I would love to have all musical theater students or all this sort of stuff, but that's not where my area has been. So I think in that way it's been good, because it's forced me to adapt. When I first started, I felt like I had to have all the answers. Now I understand that I don't, and that we're all kind of learning together in some way. So has helped me a lot to overcome that.
Absolutely.
David, sorry to interrupt. I need to close my window because some children have taken residence underneath it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's. She said that so delicately too.
Right.
Yes.
That was very PC.
It was very I really relate to that, Heather, and the idea that we as teachers, our job is to meet our students where they're at, right? And that's what I hear you saying, is that because you have a wide variety of realities,
Right.
of how what people want to do with singing, that that it just means that you have to have a wide vocabulary to match that, and
Mhm.
it's that we have to find ways to access that vocabulary in a way that's non-judgmental of ourselves. You know?
Agreed. And it's I think it opens the door, or it feels like it opens this chasm of like the expectation of the student coming in to the expert, but they truly don't know what vocal lessons, for example, are going to be. They don't even know what they're expecting to get out of it. I just want to sound like this, or
Yes.
I just want to achieve this, and they don't understand the method and the time and the vulnerability it takes and what they need to give. So it sometimes feels like, here's the student, here I am, good Lord, there's a Grand Canyon in between us, you know, and how do we figure that out to get there, not waste their time, not waste their money, not, you know, I deal with a lot of young people. So I'm always I feel like I'm managing the expectations of parents a lot. And so that, if it could just be me and the child, I feel like we could get together quicker and in the manner that suits the child best. But I oftentimes feel like I'm managing the parent wants a response of, you know, immediate success. When are they going to be ready? For whatever thing, and those students and those families, those parents who have been with me for a while understand, and they see the growth, and they're able to see that. Those that come in for like a quick fix, and you know, when is my child going to get the role? That's where we have some issues.
Sure.
Yeah. So,
Anthony, I'd love to have you pick up on this conversation. Can you talk about a moment where you felt some judgment of your own work as a teacher?
I've teaching professionally, quote unquote, it's been not that many years. So when I'm looking at the word judgment, along with that, when I think about my own situation, I think about patience. I believe that any of us that love teaching and feel that we belong there have patience of ourselves, and that we allow for the student to develop patience for themselves. It's judgment oftentimes is seen as a negative thing. And I believe that if you are a wise person, you do judge things, not in a way of saying that you are less than, but that you are trying to figure out the situation that this person is coming from. How does that compare to mine? If I've been in a lesson where I knew I did not connect with that student right at that moment, it was then what are the powers of discernment after the lesson that have been most beneficial to me? What song might I suggest to them that I think will help them open themselves up to themselves? I have found when it comes to that judgment, it is how to help the individual feel good with themselves. My thing is, I tell them, all you have is you. Everybody else is taken, or they're dead. You know, so it's about us finding that middle ground. And I guess what triggers that, you asked specifically, David, what triggers those moments of judgment? It depends upon the level of resistance I get from the individual students based upon what we're talking about. And like Heather, I mean, I have a 14-year-old and I have a 76-year-old and everybody in between. So then what journey are we trying to go on, me with them, that they will allow me to go on? And I have to remember to step back and to judge sometimes, because I've been singing since I was 4 in church. So the idea of of bringing fear to singing was not my own particular journey, at least for the singing. There were other influences. So I had to dial back to say, well, people do come into this with that fear. But I'm looking at it as singers, we are the most open, we are the most vulnerable, we are challenging these energies that are outside of us, to give to an audience that is often paying their good money to see us explain to them things that they're afraid to do for themselves. Judgment is, yeah, it's a big part of what I'm thinking about. It just depends on when it happens, at what point. But the discernment afterwards, how I ask myself the question, why? Why of myself? I feel that I get up at 5:30 most every morning because I have to be there for, or try to be the best that I can be for that student at that time and move me out of the mix as much as possible.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
And of course, sometimes it's about what do I see of them that is a reflection of myself when I'm judging.
Mm-hmm.
Because invariably there are parts of them that I can say, okay, that's Anthony talking back to Anthony.
Amen.
Yeah, that's
Amen.
Yes, indeed. Well, and I just want to lift up what you're saying too. That's to me really powerful is the idea that the judgment is not a bad thing. It's what we do with it. I think I talk to my clients about the difference. So there's I don't want you to judge yourself. I want you to have an awareness, or just as you said, and a discernment of, right? So this discernment then allows us to make decisions about where we go, right? But it's the judgment which sometimes a lot of times has that negative connotation. That's where we can get ourselves in trouble. Let's move to the positive. Gabriel, can you talk about a time when you felt like you overcame fear in your singing, and how did you achieve that?
Yeah, I think a lot of overcoming fear did happen in the studio for me, because it was open up from day one that it was a safe space for conversation and for understanding the most vulnerable part of ourselves. And what was great about my lessons was we focused so much on breath and that connection to the voice. So what then opened up was how do I connect with certain pieces, and why do I choose certain pieces to sing, to perform in the long run. So a lot of it then became, how do I tell my own story of being a person of color, of coming from a specific background, and how do I let that influence my choices within this music that may not have been written for that purpose, but I'm using it to tell my own story. And whereas, I know I've spent months on certain pieces, and it wasn't a clear and concise message until, up to the performance. So I think working on the song For Forever from Dear Evan Hansen was an incredible learning experience for me, because once I was able to tell my own truth through it, it then opened up so many opportunities on how to perform it and how people might understand me a little bit better through it. But it was through some very hard conversations with my teacher to, opening up about myself and why I chose the piece and why certain things resonate and why certain things were hard to get through, especially when there is a huge climax within the music. What opens me up to those notes and to those rhythms that then becomes a very powerful statement. And so I think working that specific piece, I think, what was it, 2 years ago, then it opened me up to seeing my own truths moving forward in the music that I would be singing. So I think that was a huge turning point.
I just want to share in this moment, because that speaks to something that I was reading, a quote that I found a couple years ago that that really speaks to this, by American psychologist Carl Rogers, and he reflected, "I found that the very feeling which has seemed to me most private, most personal, and hence most incomprehensible to others, or by others, has turned out to be an expression for which there is resonance in many other people. It has led me to believe that what is most personal and unique in each one of us is probably the very element which would, if it were shared and expressed, speak most deeply to others. This helps to understand artists and poets who have dared to express the unique within themselves." Exactly what I just heard you share, Gabriel, and that's what's so beautiful about it, is that your ability to overcome fear through a song was, the process of that sounds like in part was by connecting to the thing that makes you vulnerable and makes you unique, and that's the part that actually frees you, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And it's I mean, I'm young, I'd like to say, but
Preach it.
Yes,
Say
you
it.
are.
Speak it.
Fine.
Speak it.
We were wondering.
yes. But it's true, because you do have a lot that weighs you down in life, a lot of choices, mistakes, lessons, success, and sometimes I think it's the hardest thing to let somebody in, and to let people in, because when those patrons that pay their hard-earned money to come see us teach about something, they are coming to see something that's relatable in a way, and it is very hard to open up and let yourself be vulnerable for 90 minutes to 2 hours for a night, and it's very taxing. But I think once you do connect with that idea of being vulnerable and trying to share our greater humanity with each other, it suddenly becomes very rewarding for not only yourself but for others, and it does create some form of connection.
Alexa, let's have you pick it up there.
I have a story of, I was a senior at Ithaca and I was singing an Audra McDonald song, which is the name escaping me, but I sang it for my whole class, and Brian Damaris, who was my professor at the time, he just sort of looked at me afterwards and he said, "Come to my office tomorrow," and we set up a time. That was that. And I went to his office the next day, just like, oh, he's going to tear me to shreds. He's a really intense dude. Like, I'm nervous. And he was a guest teacher for us. I didn't know him that personally. And I sang it again, and he said, are you aware that you are not Audra McDonald? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, so stop singing like you're Audra McDonald. Stop trying to sing like Audra McDonald. Like, I didn't really know what to make of it. But it made all the sense in the world. And he said, I want you to sit down in that chair, close your eyes, and sing like Alexa. I want you to sing this song as Alexa would sing it. And it brings me to tears even now thinking about it, because I did not know how badly I needed permission to sing like myself and not like anyone else.
Absolutely.
And I was saying it, and all he said afterwards was, there you go. And he excused me from the office, and I was bewildered and still am to this day a little bit, because what you were saying, Gabriel, I think I try to fight my way to the feeling of a song through technique, and that is not how to overcome fear. Because for me, overcoming fear is when I sing from the heart, and that's what I did sitting in that chair with my eyes closed that day was I said, screw it to the scaffolding and just sang as Alexa would sing. And that's terrifying for me to think now because I think technique is so important and it's the building blocks and it's something we can rely on, but it's not how to. Technique is not the ghostbuster to fear. I think singing from the heart is the ghostbuster to fear, and that I think was the very first moment that I was ever able to overcome.
I love that, and the idea that we do study technique, so we can be doing this forever, right? But that yes, that there's that moment where we have to release that, trust that it's in our body, and tell our story, and trust that that's enough.
Mm-hmm.
That's the challenge. That's absolutely the challenge. Yes, Heather?
Can I hijack that for a second?
Yeah.
Because I think this is one of those things where I feel like I stand in my strength a lot, and I question a lot of how I got to the place where I am, not just as a performer, but as a coach. And I think sometimes it's because I share with my students, if they will receive it, my failures, what I consider my failures. And we talk a lot about realistic expectations. And because it was a long journey for me to accept who I am and what I do well as a singer. So I wanted to sing like Julie Andrews or Audra McDonald or that. I remember specifically working with a coach when Brooklyn, the musical, came out, and one of the songs in that Eden Espinosa sings, I was like, oh my gosh, that's like all I want to sing. And she very politely was like, that's not your voice. That's not you. And understanding that, yes, you can appreciate that in someone else, and you can appreciate the technique that person has, but it doesn't mean that you're less than of a singer or less than a performer or less than an artist. It means that I may have to work a little bit harder and inward to find out who I am as a performer and what my story is and how I can use this medium of song and dance and acting to get that expression out. And so I think that for me as a coach, being able to explain how I have felt, how I have navigated through that, how I have been like, yes, it would be nice to play this role, but not everybody gets to play this role. And I do this role really well. And I sing this material really well. And everybody wants to be an Ariel, but not everybody can be an Ursula. And I will embrace being an Ursula. And giving permission to a student and giving them that space to play as well, to experience that for themselves and say, let me navigate through here a little bit, I think has been one of the better tools that I have adopted as a coach, which then helps them overcome fear. Oh, I don't have to sound like Audra McDonald. Oh, I don't have to sound like Ben Platt or whatever. Like, I can be me. That has been a really great, so kudos to both of you for figuring that out.
Mm-hmm. You're touching on something, Heather, that I want to bring up too, is that we as teachers are continuing to grow in our understanding of our own craft. And I think that that's something that we have to, along with sharing, in moments when it's appropriate, sharing our own failure, sharing our own curiosity about what we know and what we don't know. I have struggled with imposter syndrome a lot in teaching. I found this quote too, from a New York Times article. It's Michael Smithson, who's a social scientist at Australian National University, co-taught this course on ignorance, and uses this analogy, which I really love. The larger the island of knowledge grows, the longer the shoreline where knowledge meets ignorance extends.
Mm.
The more we know, the more we can ask. Questions don't give way to answers as much as they proliferate together. Answers breed questions. Curiosity isn't merely a static disposition, but rather a passion of the mind that is ceaselessly earned and nurtured. So I just want to lift up too that, in voice lessons, this idea of, we may not know the answer, and when we're trying to get a student to a certain moment, but having this idea of, let's be curious about, like, what does this feel like in your body? Let's be curious about trying these different things that may or may not work. And giving the student an awareness that I don't, just because I'm teaching, yes, I have, 20 years behind me and I know a lot, but I don't know everything. And I don't know necessarily everything that's right for you individually. So let's find this together and treat this as a collaborative experience. It makes sense. Because I think that also creates more of those moments that Alexa and Gabriel are talking about, which is really exciting. It allows them to live into their own humanity, which is exciting. So I'm being mindful of the time. I want to have about 3 more hours on this call, but that's not going to happen. So let me go to just very quickly, Alexa and Gabriel. Can you talk about what do you find more intimidating, private lessons or public performance, and why? In just a nutshell.
Public performance.
Yeah.
Because the expectation in public performance, because in private lessons it is expected and allowed to mess up and not know the answer because I am a student, and I do not feel that freedom whenever I am performing. I feel as if I have to have a product nailed down.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree. Public performance. For me, though, I think it's public performance in a smaller venue when it's a little bit more intimate. I don't know why a smaller, I guess working in class was always the scariest part for me, because even though that is a workspace, you almost felt that there was this need to present a finished product rather than continue to work towards what you will present to the professionals, post grad. Whereas working in the studio, you find out 100 ways not to pronounce a certain vowel, and then you find the one that works. So I would have to say public performance, definitely.
Somebody got called out, I imagine, Anthony.
Well.
But no, he stood me in front of the mirror. We worked it out. Big Bertha, she took care of me.
Oh my lord! And this is being videotaped. Oh my Jesus!
That is hysterical. But since you put Anthony on the spot, Gabriel, I'll put you on the spot. No, just a little. In that, in class, I did notice. Knowing you as well as I do, I noticed in our class that was sometimes a struggle for you, of overcoming that kind of public performance, with peers, right?
Yes.
And I totally recognize that as something that's that's really challenging. I know a lot of students who have graduated musical theater programs, and they're like, oh, finally, I can actually now I can do my work, because I don't feel like I'm under a magnifying glass, which is I think an important thing for us teachers to be thinking about in that, what could I have done as your teacher in that situation to create a more a safe atmosphere where you felt like that was okay, and what can I say to students to create that atmosphere as well, right? That's the thing that's exciting to me, is that there's always an evolution of thought on these things, and there are different ways to explore about how we can talk to one another about this. So Anthony and Heather, I want to ask you, what are some ways do you think that students can help themselves overcome fear in a studio or a classroom?
Do you care? Well, there are a couple of things. I have one main thing, but I will start with I. The students have this ability to research and hear anything whenever they want to. I didn't grow up in that world. I had to walk to the library. I could handwrite my term papers. I could type them and get mad because, you know, the whiteout, I had to pull that out and didn't have room for the footnotes at the end. I totally grew up on that. So the fact that everything is so immediate for them, but so many do not see the honesty of being able to sit on a sofa and at least start their research and their understanding about what they are singing, not only what they are singing, but where it is coming from. What did the people wear? What did they eat? Was there, you know, were there toilets? Were there, you know, something simple like that. To me is phenomenal, the amount of research at their fingertips in a phone, but there are so many who don't take advantage of it. Now, to get back to my bigger issue is that I always go back to breath, because as one breathes is how one is going to live. And I ultimately think that that is how you are going to find the best of your singing, your singing voice. So when you're talking about looking to lessen the fears of the student coming in and or of, if I'm judging myself in the studio, then I'm looking at what calms my heart, what calms my sensibilities, as Alexa so poignantly said, you know, about that singing with the heart. And that is finding the steadiness and the rhythm of the heartbeat that connects me and the student and all of us to all living things, so that we know that that energy flow is, we're not alone. We are connected to something much bigger than us. And so this is what I look to explain through various and sundry ways to help with that.
I love that, because the breath too, I find that when I get clients on their breath, all of those voices just go away.
Right.
Because
Well,
there's such maturity.
Well, and my first teacher, which I don't know if there are many students made for this anymore, but my very first teacher at 15, when I started training, the very first year, all I did was breathe. I sang maybe 5 notes in that year.
Wow.
All I did was breathe, nothing else. And, but she had every problem known to man as a singer. And she told me this. That's how she knew how to guide me. And I'm still in touch with her. She's the last of my teachers that's living. And so that's why I'm so big on the idea that as we breathe, so shall we live.
Yes. I love that.
Brilliant.
Heather, how about you? How do you feel like you can help students can help themselves?
I think one of the things that I encourage them a lot is to play. And I mentioned that before. I believe, as both Gabriel and Alexis said, sometimes that the fear comes from usually the peer group, you know, the judgment in the peer group. And it was interesting to me, one student who, when we do studio showcase, has no problem going out there and performing, but when asked to sing the national anthem in front of her school for their fun run, she literally this time last year froze, was Skyping me for, you know, lost her voice, all this sort of stuff. So it's okay to be distant and performing and be judged with some people that she doesn't know, but not the people that she has to go to school with day in and day out. And so that has really opened my eyes to how we sort of arrest that within ourselves. And I know, because I felt that too a lot. And I remember in college, and it didn't have anything to do with performing. It was in a leadership role that I always had the fear of people laughing at me. And so I stepped out and laughed at myself as I sort of made a production. I was a chairman of something. I was the entertainment chairman for SGA. And I said, I'm the one that plans the parties, and did some silly thing. And everybody laughed. And I remember going, oh, I have control over that.
Mm.
Instead of me doing something and having them laugh at it, if I intentionally put myself out there to elicit the laugh, then they are now controlled by me. Like, they're not laughing at me, they're laughing because of me. So not that I carried that for years, but I did, because it fear stopped me from other things. But I encourage, like you're talking about, Gabriel, about the fear of cracking or hitting that one note. I will say to them, let's just get that out here. Let's get that out in the classroom. Go for it. I don't care. And what I will also do is have them sing it in a manner of ridiculously silly ways. If they are singing a pop song or a musical theater pop song, I will have them sing it in their most operatic voice possible, or I will have them sing it as the most countrified that they could ever, to go to the extremes of all of these areas. In doing so, my hope is that they will not worry about being silly when they need to sing it, because they've already experienced what, they go to that silly nth extreme. And in doing so, I feel sometimes that they also find different ways of saying a vowel, or saying a word, or saying something else that they wouldn't have done, because they were in this focus, and they were in, this is the only way to sing this song, and I either sing it like the recording, or I don't sing it well at all. And so having them, I will have them lay on their back on the floor. Just physical things. And if I could get them to stand on their head and not, things that they're, a lot of times where they're focused on the act of doing it, that's what their focus is, as opposed to singing. And then if their fear, for example, is, I didn't hit that note, that's what's keeping them. Surely 99% of the time when they're doing the silly version of it, they hit that note. They don't even think about hitting that note. And then I'll sit down and say, do you realize that not only did you hit that note, you hit that note effortlessly. It was beautiful. You didn't struggle with it at all. And there was no tension. There was no anything. Alexa, are you understanding what I'm feeling?
Yeah.
It was, it was none of that. And then they
never had that conversation.
Are you getting what we're throwing down? Does it make it worse or better when it comes from someone else?
I love it because I get it. I'll be in my room just organizing something, and I'm singing something, and then I'll pause and be like, did anyone hear that? Did
Ding, ding, ding.
witness this rare moment of peace that resulted in a free voice?
But I think that that's what you're talking about too. And that I think that's eventually, if there's a student that can get it, I will say, when we talk about it, they'll be like, what happened? And I said, you didn't think about it. You didn't think about singing the note, and where your breath is, there you are. Also where your fear is, there you're going to be too. If you're hesitant if you're fearful about hitting the note, guess what? You're going to not hit the note, So if you don't think about hitting the note, and you think about how silly you look standing on your head singing this song, 9 times out of 10, you're going to hit the note, and you're not even going to think about it. So that's my very unorthodox way of getting through that.
I love that.
Yeah, wonderful.
I just want to be mindful of all of your time, and I just want to ask one more question of Alexa and Gabriel, if I may. What do you think that we can do as teachers to help students overcome fear in the studio?
I'll go first. Let me consult my notes.
Let me go to what I typed up last night.
Okay.
This is where I cut out, because
this is why I chose them. Why I chose both of them.
Yeah.
On their game.
They are thorough.
I listen to my lessons quite a bit, and that's how I typically warm up. And there's something that you say, David, that always calms my heart, which is, it's okay if you're at 40 or 60%. And I don't know what it is about that, because I want to believe that no matter what comes out of my mouth, I'm 100%, and that's and being I can get really picky about it, but I think it's this acceptance. It's mainly an acceptance of whatever comes out of your mouth is perfectly fine. And if it's at a 60% because you're feeling low that day, or it's a new technique that or a new piece that you're working on, wherever you are is exactly where you're meant to be and exactly where you should be. So that always brings me a lot of peace. And actually speaking, Anthony, you said something that really resonated with me, finding the steadiness and rhythm of the moment to connect us to everything, like earth, and connect us to animals and connect us to each other. I think I personally get so wrapped up in booking the role, or does my mix sound like my whatever, and how many likes on Instagram does this video have, and things that don't matter. And I think something that is helpful to me when I hear it in a learning environment is what truly matters, which is the story. And that at the end of the day, if I crack in a performance in Carnegie Hall, will I be a little upset? Probably a lot. However, it doesn't matter. What matters is that I showed up. And what matters is that we're all in this room together experiencing this moment. And that's what matters. Is the rest of it doesn't. It's the story, it's the heart of the thing that really matters, that connects us to everything. So I think remind us about that, and not about, can I mix up to an E? Like that doesn't matter. That's just, I will get to that note how I get to that note, and that's perfectly fine as it is. I don't really quite believe that yet, but I'm getting it.
Yes, bravo to you.
Yes.
That's awesome. Gabriel, how about you?
I think just the reminder of it's all a process. And as Anthony has definitely told me, is, we live a wonderful life full of experiences and full of lessons, but in the end, we all end up 6 feet under. So how are we going to make this process worthwhile, not just for ourselves, but for others? And like Alexa was saying, knowing where you are with your voice on a specific day is so much better, because you can work within those limits of the day, even though we are limitless in a sense. Because I think something that resonated with me is that our voices are going to continue to change. And Anthony explained it many times, how his voice has changed from when he was 15 and started lessons to now. And I've noticed my own development from not having a vibrato when I first started taking lessons to now discovering how the breath did open me up to a certain point. Now I can approach music differently. And I think what needs to be reminded is that, from teachers, from students, and is that we are all our own unique individuals, and our voices are very unique. We might have a similar bone structure and resonance and timbre as ABC artists, but you're never going to be ABC artists. And so how can we work within our own, not box, but our character with our voices? And how do we tell those stories with our own unique spin on them? And so in my lessons, that was definitely something that would bring me back, is that I'm not my classmates. I'm not Carl Anderson. I'm not, somebody else. But what was great was after coming to that realization, then I was given a list of people who might inspire me because the sounds are similar. So it was never pushed on me to go out and find somebody and sing like somebody. It was discover and realize how it feels, how your own voice feels, and then go join a group of artists that you can relate to and pull some technique or ideas from, but you never try to mimic. And it's all helping you understand your own individual voice.
The one thing I wanted to just add to this is the idea of mindfulness meditation. It's something that I have been understanding more. My fiance teaches mindfulness, and so I've learned a fair amount from him, and have been. I know it's just nice to say fiance. He's an amazing human being and has brought such light and joy to my life. But thinking about how I can, I love Anthony. You touched on this a little bit. Talking about getting up at 5:30, getting up early, and like getting yourself present in the day. So when I come into that studio and the student is there, I'm ready, and I can receive everything, and I can be aware of the energy in the room. I don't have my own noise dampening that information that is so helpful as a teacher. And I'm also, when I'm the student, I can also dampen that noise so I can be aware of my surroundings and calm myself down. So the way in which meditation, in whatever way or shape form that is helpful to each of us, is how do we use that as a way of calming ourselves so we can be in space together and create the best work together. Yes, go ahead, Anthony.
I have, what's been on my heart and mind of late, and that I've said with my students, certainly to Gabriel, is that I feel what keeps me somewhat in check with just people in general is that all of us have gifts, but at some point we have to return it. And we don't own this. It's going through us as we are now in the form that we know ourselves to be in, but we also can be comforted. Once we return it, it is never lost, it is never dissipated, and it will go to someone else. And hopefully in these young minds like Alexa and Gabriel, they will be able to carry on that mantle for us in that way when we are no longer here.
Well, I have to say, knowing both of them, I'm not worried about the future.
That's beautiful.
Amen.
That's beautiful.
Very, very fortunate. So
I'd love to add something because it was something that Alexa and Gabriel both said, and something that I tell students as well, but that I didn't think about it until one of you said something. Maya Angelou's quote says, "I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." And you always sort of think about it that in communication and how we treat individuals that we come into contact with. And that's a better explanation of what I tell students often when they're fearful of that note and of that performance, is that think back on while we can appreciate a technically proficient performance, I, for myself, never go away feeling inspired. I feel inspired in that way of, wow, look at the craft. He or she has really worked to it. But it's those moments where they're giving of themselves to us as the audience, to where that's what I take away from it. That's where I will remember and I will respect and I will admire the work that has been done in the craft and the technique. But and I have two examples for that. One, that I rely on the fact that Ethel Merman was told never to take a voice lesson ever in her life after they heard her sing in the middle of her first performance in Annie Get Your Gun. The producers came down, stopped her at intermission and said, "Do not ever take a voice lesson ever again, no matter what anybody else tells you, don't ruin that.
Right.
And then the second example that I love, love, love is that Michael Crawford said one time when he was doing Phantom of the Opera, if you think back as he was building the boat, right, and bringing the boat, that it was controlled, and he had to do it with like the stick, right, and it goes from like comes on from stage left, and then has to be turned to go down stage to the audience. Well, it didn't turn, and it went just from stage left to stage right, and then the only way he could do it was to put the oar down and turn it himself. So during that performance, you hear nighttime softens. That's how it is on the recording, because they were so moved by what he did during the performance. They were like, what happened? They couldn't get the boat to turn. So it's like, in that moment, he did what was necessary. It was not what was on the charts. It was not what was in the sheet music, but by God, did it affect everybody. And we now have that sense in that recording forever.
Yeah.
So, which I think are very, you could, like Anthony, you said, you can go and see that, or you can go and hear that. I'm not just telling you that. You can hear what I'm saying and go, oh, I now can see he wasn't worried. He was worried about not crushing the boat. You know, there are other things to worry about. So I just offer that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Gang, this has been really a very rich hour. I'm so grateful to each of you for sharing so personally and beautifully. And I know that it's going to be helpful to people who come across this, and look forward to hearing more. Thank you all so much. I'm going to stop.
Well, thank you.